Hi everyone, welcome back to another edition of Mizuno Golf Live. Today we've got Chris Voshall from Mizuno US, well-known guru of products, and we have Jay Smith over in Bury, who's a pro and a Mizuno custom fitter. So welcome guys, thanks for coming. Chris, what have you been up to for the last few months? It's been a busy stretch leading into this Mizuno Pro launch.
There's been a lot going on. There's a lot of travel, a lot of meeting with some tour players, a lot of showing off new product, and honestly, it's been talking about the product to basically anybody who will listen. So, with Mizuno, we're right on the heels of the PGA show. We're coming up on that. So we've got some new irons, we've got new wedges, we've got new drivers that have launched, we've got new drivers that haven't launched. Honestly, there's just a lot of new stuff to talk about. So to me, I've just been trying to get in front of as many people as possible, so I'm excited about that.
It's quite a change for Mizuno. We're a very, very steady company with launches, and it seems like each year there seems to be more product coming along. Conscious effort?
Well, it's interesting because, I think, and you'll read it on social media or whatever, people are like, oh, too many launches. What I think Mizuno has done is we have staggered out launches that I think a lot of other companies would have just put right on top of each other. Like talking about our wood line in particular, there are now 4 driver models in our line, but they've been staggered. Like 2 came and then another one and then another one. So it's like we built up the final line as opposed to just here's 6 new drivers. The old 6 are gone. Here's 6 more. Blah blah blah. I think it gives us time to understand what each product does in a fitter's hand or in a professional's hand, and then help us really almost strategically attack certain parts of the driver fitting game. So to me, it feels like a lot, but if you look at the breadth of products, it's not that many, honestly.
Jay, and I've noticed from you particularly, I saw you reacted pretty quickly to the new ball ruling and the changes that are upcoming. Quite an interesting video from you the other day that I saw.
I resisted a little bit initially because obviously when it first came through, my initial thoughts were get on straight away. However, I just wanted to take some time to listen to different people, and there's quite a few different people which put their oar in as to whether it's a good or a bad thing. I've got my own personal view. I'm not saying I'm right. I've just got my own personal view, and then everyone will have their own. But I don't necessarily see if you look at other companies have done for quite some time now staggered launches when it comes to their woods especially. So I don't necessarily see it's a bad thing having a staggered launch necessarily. When you look at Mizuno now going to a 2-year life cycle rather than the previous one, it shows they're comfortable and confident with their product. So adding another one, especially what the new one's going to be, I don't think it's a bad idea at all.
But while we're on personal viewpoints, because it's very easy to hide behind the company one, Chris, what's your thought on the new ball ruling and where that set is?
I don't like it personally. What I'll say is from the engineering side, every time there's a new set of rules or new set of parameters, we have new benchmarks to base everything off of. So I think the initial feeling is, oh, well, you just took something away from me. But at the same time, it's like the deeper you analyze it, you're going to find some wins in there. You're going to find some things that you can engineer to perhaps, I won't say work around the rule, but using the new parameters, how do you get the most out of those parameters? So again, I've never won for a roll back. I understand capping things. The roll back is what bothers me. But it's like the rollback is kind of pitched as, well, we just changed the test parameters. But, if an old product all of a sudden isn't legal, then I don't know, that's always rubbed me the wrong way.
And do we know at the moment, so that the RB Tour has gone down pretty well. My Golf Spy tested it, it came out ranked really high, especially for the higher club head speed players. That's likely something that's going to be effective. That's more likely than not going to be an illegal ball in 2030.
I don't know the ins and outs of the actual, I've read obviously all of the USGA RNA, all the publications of what the new rules are, what the new test protocols are, the 10 degrees at 2250 at what, all of these parameters I understand. To say I've hit our ball at those parameters, I have not. Or I haven't witnessed our ball hit at that parameters. Other people have, and they can probably be a little bit more insightful to me in terms of where we stand, in terms of how far the ball can carry at those parameters. But I gotta imagine we've been pushing the bounds at the current, I'll say current because I haven't changed yet, the current test protocol. So I gotta imagine because this is a rollback, that right now we have some things we have to reconsider.
Now, I'm going to take a wild guess that most of the people listening in today are going to want to hear your take on the new Mizuno Pro irons. But they've been in the market in Japan since September, October, I believe. We've had pictures circulated for quite a few months. Just before we get there, I want to talk about the new woods that are coming up. I want to talk about ST-MAX. I want to talk about STG. But we had a little bit of fun, didn't we? We went out to... I don't even know if we're allowed to say where we were, but somewhere on the coast of Atlanta, a very nice golf course. And we had all the Mizuno players together for the first time, probably ever. I would say that really all the US tour players, everyone that was contracted was there. And the first time, definitely, since everybody's been playing driver. So suddenly we had a pad of maybe 7 or 8 players. We go through the list. We had Keith, Ben Griffin, Bailey Tardy, Stephen Fisk, Bryson Nimmer. Continue, Chris. I've missed some.
Yeah, I mean, it was Jonathan Yan, one of the new guys. Who else do we have there?
Well, Luke was there. Luke Donald was there.
Yeah, we can't forget him. Like it was an impressive showing of people, and to me, that was one of the most fun weeks. I'll say stressful in terms of the planning and how we're going to execute on everything. But with that stress, I think the amount of content and the amount of just insights we're going to get from all the players, not just on who they are and why they're with Mizuno, but on how they work with us to make our product better. To me, I can't wait to just see everything that begins to unfold from that week. So yeah, that was I guess that was like a month or maybe we're almost approaching 2 months ago.
Yeah, sometime.
And we're still sorting through everything that we collected because it was a full-on week. It was great.
Now, Jay, you'd have been in your element there, but we got to stand back and watch Keith and Ben hit the new drivers, comparing them to their gamers. And Keith's a tough one because actually he's had a pretty phenomenal year as driver, right, Chris? So up to the end of the FedEx playoffs, he was leading the total driver stats on PGA Tour.
That's right. Yeah, the basically the combination of how far do you drive it and how straight do you drive it. Like he led that category in terms of the rank in each of those together. And it was funny. Like I'll say one of the ideas we had to put together of like, here it'll be a fun thing to shoot. Let's have a long drive competition, but then you subtract your feet offline from yards carried. Well, let's put together a little competition. And then Keith, I think, was second one up, and his second swing, I believe it carried 320 and it was 3 feet offline. So it was like a game over. Like we can't go anywhere from there. So it's impressive to watch him drive the ball. And what's cool about our staff, too, is just the combination of players. Luke, the magician with his wedges and irons. Ben Griffin with his wedges is unbelievable. Stephen Fisk, a new young kid, like he bombed the ball. Like he hits it.
Probably more than anyone, didn't he?
He was very impressive. And then obviously we had Jim Herman there, who's multiple winner on tour. Just an all-around game. Like some of the shots he was able to hit, particularly short game stuff, bunker shots. Unbelievable. Like I'd put him up against Luke in a bunker competition, which there aren't many people I'd say that, but man, the shots he was hitting, they were super impressive.
You got to hit a few balls. You played a match, didn't you? You played with Stephen.
I did. So I was dragged off of the driving range to go play a match with Stephen Fisk. Those who don't know Stephen, he was a really well accomplished amateur Walker Cupper. He finished actually second in the NCAAs. He was graduated the same year as the Victor Hovland, Matthew Wolf, Colin Morikawa. It was a pretty strong year of guys coming out of school, and he finished second in the NCAAs that year and won multiple times. He has worked his way through Korn Ferry, and he's at PGA Tour Q School right now. So we expect big things from him, and he's done a lot with his swing. But to your question, yeah, I got to go play a match with him and Ribbit Carlson, who's one of our YouTube golfers. Really fun to get out there, and I'll say I was by far the short hitter in the group, but I think I held my own. So
you hit a lot of fairways, Chris. I was there watching you hit plenty, and that was the first public outing for the new ST-MAX driver as well.
It was fun. It was actually like 30 minutes before I had one built up for me. And then we shot a little video of just talking about my driver on the range, and my first swing was on camera. But overall, I think I missed one fairway that entire match, and that was after the match was already closed out. So it was later on. But it's just a straight hitting driver, which for me as a golfer, it's exactly what I've been looking for.
Now, before we go fully depth into ST-MAX, quick mention for Marco Penge as well, because behind the scenes, we the soundbite of, we called it Mizuno Next Gen, the idea that we're developing younger talent, bringing players through from a younger age, kind of sharing their success with them. The old model of kind of hunting around for a great player who might be available in the world's top 25 is pretty much long gone, right, with the money at the elite end of the game. And Marco appears to me to be the first graduate from this program with Mizuno.
Yeah, I think he's definitely come into his own, and we're excited about what he can become. And what we've seen from him just over the last couple of weeks he's an impressive ball striker. I mean, the length he was hitting some fly-highs was absurd. And it was cool because like even DP World Tour was posting a bunch on him just because the sound of that ball coming off his club, it's different. Like it's really cool. So we're excited to see where the future stands for Mizuno Golf and kind of the players that we're developing right now. And I think we're just starting to see the tip of the iceberg of all these players that are going to start coming out.
I've got a note in front of me. He led the drive. He finished fourth last week. He led her in South Africa. He was right up there in the third round. But he finished off with leading the driving distance, 348.83 yards. That's not bad. So probably some evidence towards the rollback as well of that golf ball.
Ball falling back.
Everybody hates watching the long ball, right?
What's your thoughts on all that then, Jay? You watched a little bit of that golf, or you're not a watcher of tour golf these days?
I used to be an avid watcher of it, but being so busy lately, I don't hardly get a chance to watch it, unfortunately. But I mean, it's my impressive with Keith doing what he did last year, being up there and right at the end of the FedEx and stuff. But basically, he was there all year, being number one. A lot of it is the player. Of course, Keith is exceptionally strong. He's quick. He's accurate. But if the product was rubbish, he definitely wouldn't be where it was. So people could argue, if you put a TaylorMade or a Callaway driver in his hands, would he be still number one? Well, possibly as well. But it's just to go say the product is still really, really good and much, much better than people think. If you've got that type of player who could put anything in his hands, you put Mizuno and he's top. It's impressive.
Well, I think one of the cool things I would say about him, when we came on to contract with Keith, it was before we kind of had a driver requirement in the bag for tour players. So Keith was playing a competitor driver beforehand, and that was still the best part of his game was driving. But honestly, we feel like we've unlocked more out of him with him being a part of the development side of it, testing things along the way, kind of giving us feedback. I feel like it's just the start of kind of where we're going with Mizuno Woods, but having somebody of his caliber to be able to give feedback, what he's looking for, it's not what everybody's looking for, but what he's looking for is very, very specific. So to be able to deliver that's pretty cool.
And this guy,
what I like about the fact,
the crop of players coming through. Sorry, Jay, the crop of players we've got coming through. Marco, great driver of the golf ball. Bailey Tardy, great driver of the golf ball, led at the Women's US Open. Stephen Fist, great, low-key, great driver of golf ball. Ben Griffin was leading stats at points last year with driver as well at certain tournaments. So that new group of players looks very different to that old group of Mizuno players.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely a different crop of players, and again, a little bit it speaks to the game where it is right now. Of if you're not a good driver of the golf ball, you're probably not out there on tour. So for that to be paired with Mizuno, like almost coming to its own on the product side, with Woods getting more and more in play, more attention, and having the right products out there, to me, it's like that's proof in itself, because the analytics, the strokes gained stats, all of these things just continually show if you don't drive it well, you will not last out here. So the fact that, at this time in golf, that Mizuno drivers are starting to make a push, that's kind of showing something of the product has to be there. The product has to perform.
And you see the progression through the years of how the product has changed, where back in when they were blue, on top, and then the ST started, and you can see how Mizuno changed the design. They were hunting to be more relevant and more commonplace on tour, and to do that they needed to change their product, their design, and so they hunted for speed, and with the titanium faces and all the different changes they did in 190 and stuff like that. Then they went to understand, once they've got the speed aspect, you can see when they changed to okay, how do we make something stable, how do we make something forgiving? And so arguably in the previous 1 to 230, it was one of the most stable drivers next to, if not including, ping, which are always known as the daddies of forgiveness. But then you bring the 230 together, and it's trying to combine every single thing that Mizuno have learned and spent a lot of money in R&D learning to become effectively more relevant and current in the game today.
So leading us nicely onto the ST-MAX, Chris, as you might have been the first person in the world to play a round of golf with one. Tell us a little bit about it, and tell us how you found it as a player.
It's the product that I've been looking for a while, and I know Jay mentioned before, like the ping driver. Ping makes a phenomenal driver, and it fits a lot of different players, and it has become the go-to of, hey, I want stability, I want to find fairways, I want that ball to go straight. Okay, here's your ping. Ping does that through some really, really nice engineering, and they also do that by putting every single gram they have towards moment of inertia. It's like, here's what we're going to do. Like other aesthetics, sound, some of these other parts of it, they're willing to give a little bit because the MOI is the key. Like that's what they are going for. So with that in mind, I'll say when we've been testing with drivers, working with new players, potential signees or amateurs, juniors, everything, I don't think we've had any problem beating anybody's gamer except for some ping guys. I'll say there's some ping guys who we struggled because they knew what they were going to get. Honestly, like a lot of the ping guys accept non-optimization because they know what they're going to get. So if you're willing to accept non-optimization, and then Mizuno says, well, let us further optimize you, like it's a little bit of a tricky conversation. So that's where the Max product is something that is different for us. With the 230 line, we had the Z and the X. The Z is a very, very stable driver, but it's a very low spin driver. With low spin comes a little bit of instability and comes a little bit of, do I know exactly what it's going to do when it starts going offline? It's not quite as on rails as like an ST-MAX driver. So to have from the engineering side, to have the direction of, okay, if your spin requirement is this, we already have that club. If your spin requirement can, give just a little bit, we can give you and unlock some extra benefits. And that's kind of what the ST-MAX is. So it's putting a lot more mass low and deep, still have that Cortex chamber to pull some mass forward as well. So we're not putting every single gram towards MOI. I'll say, and you look at the world of, I think there's some stuff that's leaked in terms of what's coming out, what the MOI quotations are out there of some of the, I'll call it Max products from other people. It's not quite there in terms of MOI, but where it lacks in the few percentage points of MOI, it far makes up for in terms of aesthetics, sound, feel, and control. So I'll say that we are the best looking, best sounding, best feeling, crazy forgiving club that's out there. It's funny because like I haven't hit some of the new ones, some of the new, call it 10K, like that's going to be the talking point you hear a lot out there. But I've talked to some retailers and I said, having not hit 10K from company A, company B, whatever, here's what my guess from an engineer, here's what 10K is going to do. And to a man, they were like, you were correct. Like you nailed what that product is. And so to me, like, it's funny when an engineer is given like a goal of, let's talk about 10,000 moment of inertia, a combined toe heel up down MOI of 10,000. To hit that number, you have to sacrifice a couple of things. You have to sacrifice the size, look, and aesthetic of a shaping of it. I'll go back to, some examples of like when the limit of this, here's the square you can live in, in the driver world. This is all you can do. So what the engineers do, we'll make it square, fit exactly in that. And what happened? They sounded bad. They spun a ton. They did a lot of things. And then there was 5900 MOI is your max toe heel. So what everyone do? Chase 5900. And as a result, again, high spin, bad sound, strange looking. Now it's like chasing a number to me isn't chasing a result. It's chasing a static measurement in a lab as opposed to what is the golfer wanting to get out of this? And that's where like the max, it's in the mid 9s in terms of like the toe heel up down combined MOI, which is crazy high. Like it is ridiculously
Give me some context on that, Chris. What would the current Z be?
The current Z would be in the mid 8s. So, it's a significant jump from that. And the current Z is a very forgiving driver. So when you combine toe heel up down with that, it's significantly and measurably more forgiving than the STZ, but it still looks and performs like a proper golf club. It does spin a touch more, but it doesn't spin a lot more. And there's a lot you can do with that. So, it still sounds great. It looks really clean and addressed, which, to me, it's like, I'm so excited about this product because it's going to go up against some hefty competition. But I think if you look at the overall, if you just ignore one number and look at what am I looking to get out of this on the course, I think we're going to deliver everything and more.
Jay, any thoughts on that? Having not seen the products?
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, from a custom fitting point of view, when I was coaching custom fitting full time, again, going back to ping, it's so difficult. When you got someone come in and they've got a ping in their hands, you think, oh, I really hope this wasn't custom fit properly, because if it is, I'm going to struggle to beat this, because they are very much so down stability. Now, yes, they do come at a price to a certain extent because of certain parameters on their metrics are a little bit high. The spin rate is one of them, so they definitely won't be the longest, but Ping have always said we don't care about being the longest, we want to be the longest overall when you take into account miss hits and everything. The fact that Mizuno is now progressing towards the max as an idea brings them in. Okay, we're talking about tour pros and stuff like that, very much so, but for the people that play golf every day, the max potentially is going to be a far more common and useful product than possibly even the Z and the X. And the G obviously is a very, very unique beast in itself. But having a max, having a head which has got that much forgiveness to it, and I'm assuming the fact that it's going to come in multiple lofts, and I don't know what the specifications are as yet, but the fact that it's going to be for the slower swing speed player as well, the fact that it's got multiple shaft options, etc., it's just a great thing from a point of view of having an option for a everyday golfer, which is not just a ping.
Chris, can you whiz me through the actual product, just to actually show it off for everybody? I've got some slides that will kind of intersperse with this to give people a better idea. We'd love to see the one in your hand.
For sure, yeah. I'm holding the ST-MAX right here. This is 9.5. It comes in, there's 3 different lofts in this. So we got 9, 5, 10, 5, 12, which gives you a lot of opportunities from the fitting side to be able to open, close, do it, hit some visuals that are requirements for certain players that, sometimes you'd have to sacrifice if you don't have the proper head options. So spec aside, the biggest things you'll notice, a ton of mass concentrated back. When you're talking driver design and MOI design, the way you get a large MOI is you put as much mass as far away from the heaviest part of the club as possible. On a driver, the face is always going to be the heaviest part because it has strict thickness requirements in order to not be above COR. What I mean is the titanium around here could be at 1.2, 1.1 millimeters. If you do a 1.1 millimeter face on a driver, it's just going to crack. Or if it doesn't crack, it's going to be too hot. So with that in mind, the face is the heaviest, so mass here is going to be massive for MOI. So a ton of mass concentrated low and deep. And on top of that, our Cortec chamber, which is a TPU material with a stainless steel weight embedded within it. And that's what I would talk about earlier. We didn't put every single gram in MOI, which is going to have a spin. It's a little bit detrimental to low spin. We've still got some mass concentrated low and forward. So that's going to bring that MOI down ever so slightly, but at the same time, it's going to make that club a little bit more controllable. So if that player spins it too much, I don't think this one's going to spin nearly as high as some of those 10K clubs out there. So that another thing about it, when you look at the actual Cortex chamber itself. It's moved a little bit from the previous generation. The previous generation, the STZ and the ST-MAX, it lives a little bit more toe side. With this one, the idea behind it being just ultimate forgiveness, ultimate stability all across the face, we centered this much more like centered across the face. So that's going to give you a much more consistent ball speed regardless of toe impact or heel impact. Then we use a new face material as well. It's a face material that we have on our STG. It's a Thai LFS, lighter, faster, stronger. All the things that you love in a face material. Lighter, again, helps us move mass from here to here. Faster and stronger means we went thinner with it. When you go thinner, you get better ball speeds across a larger portion of the face. So to me, like, I'm so excited about this club because it looks the part. And when you're talking max, it is maximum MOI. Like it is really high MOI, but we also max out club length as well. We went longer than we have been. And when you're talking stability, when you're talking a golf club that's going to be ultra stable, you can go a little bit longer and kind of get away with that because even your mishits are going to be more stable, which mishits come with the territory when you go a little bit longer. So now with like the whole fitting world, we've got a lot of different options for that, but the Max it checks a lot of boxes.
Now, just to come back to one of the points there, I've got some pictures that will play over the top of some of this conversation. I've got it shot next to the STG, which is almost, this is really good comparison. It's just basically the polar opposite, right? Yeah. So where would you go? G, X, Z, and then probably Max in that order?
Yeah, if you're talking in terms of head size, the G is 440 cc's. The Z, the X, and the Max are all 460. But what we did with those 460, like the volume of the footprint is different. If anything, I'd say that if you're like visually, the G looks the smallest. I'd almost say the X looks slightly smaller than the Z because the X is a little bit deeper face design. It's a little bit more pear shape. The Z, again, we pulled some more mass back, which extends that footprint. And then the Max, we extended it even further from there. So if you're ranking them in terms of like visual size, it'd go G, X, Z, Max.
One thing I've noticed is we've been watching a lot of players coming in now. I'm sure you have as well. And it really isn't a right and a wrong. Like, we've had some players in who were absolutely shocked how easy the G is to hit. And club head speed, quickest with the G. It's obviously moving through the air the fastest because it's the more compact head. Very fast club, very fast off the face. Not always the longest for everyone, bizarrely, because those numbers don't always get optimized in the right way.
Right.
We've had players, the G seems to be the easiest to maybe square and turn over.
Mm-hmm.
With some players. So I'll give you a good example. So OJ Farrell absolutely loved the G. Didn't have a problem. Hits the middle of the face every time. It sets up beautifully for him. That extra club head speed, extra ball speed worked for OJ. We've had other players, I can say the name, where the Max was significantly better. And even though the club head speed was a bit lower, the overall distance was greater. Can you talk to me a little bit about that, Chris, in terms of how they suit slightly different players? And it's not always about a better player or a worse player. You've got level players where sometimes the Max is more suitable than the G.
Optimization doesn't care about like your skill level or anything like that. Like for a given ball speed and a given, set of launch parameters, meaning like angle of attack and head speed and stuff like that, there are numbers that are going to optimize your carry. And I know Jay can speak better than I can about this, but for a certain player, the low spin of the G is great. If you're someone who hits with a little bit of a descending blow, honestly, like if you can start with a super low spin, if you think about the physics of it, energy that's contributed to spin is energy taken away from ball speed. So it's not surprising that you see highest ball speeds from the STG. It's a little bit smaller head as well, and you see that no spin. But for a lot of players, no spin it could mean less carry. I am one of those players. Like if I hit that G, I'll get spin rates in the 1230. Like I think I saw a 1230 and I think my highest spin G shot was like 1450. And it's just like, it's not playable. Like if I were playing over at St. Andrews and it was baked out all the time, that could be a blast. But when I need to carry a bunker and I'm seeing this thing fall out of the sky, it's not good. So I benefit from a little bit more spin. With that in mind, the ball speed typically drops just a touch. Again, we're talking on the less than a mile an hour typically. It could be a touch more for some. It all depends on the player. But for me with the ST-MAX, I was able to get the same ball speed I could get out of my STZ, but it's just more stable and it spins a little bit more. Like it was funny when I was playing the Z before, it's a low spin driver. And to me, if I needed extra carry, I hit a cut. Like my cut carried further than my draw. So that was one of the things of it's like just understanding what is optimal, what's going to carry the furthest. Now I don't have to do that with the Max. Now if I want maximum carry, I can just kind of go at it because it's giving me the spin rates that I need.
That's dominant place.
The other thing I've noticed is the one thing that's consistent with the Max is everybody says it feels like you're swinging it on tracks. He just won't move. Wherever you're setting that ball off is where it's going to finish. Now, for some people, that's a great thing. For some people, it's not so great. We've got people that like to work the ball, and the Max just doesn't work for them at all because they're a worker.
Right.
Maybe those are a little bit late with their hands or something in there, something within their technique where the Max doesn't suit because it's so stable. They can't do that little bit of extra work sort of around impact area.
When you talk about you brought up an interesting thing earlier when you're talking about being able to turn over the G a little bit more. There's so many things like dynamically that are happening in a golf swing, and one of those factors is what we call in the engineering world CG distance. How far is the center of gravity from the shaft axis? We talk about like on a muscle back golf club why they're so workable. They're workable for two reasons. One, the MOI is not as high, so the club it will naturally deflect a little bit on an off center strike, but also the CG distance is smaller. A smaller CG distance puts the player a little bit more in control, meaning that if they want to shut that face, they're able to do that easier. The moment about that shaft axis is smaller. So when you're talking about the G, which is a 440cc head, shorter from toe to heel, that moment is smaller. It's easier for a player to turn that over versus you talk about the Max being on tracks. It is a larger head. It's longer from toe to heel. That CG distance is longer, meaning the head is more in control. So it's not just the MOI number, it's the moment about that shaft axis as well. Jay, I'd love to hear your take from like the fitting world of kind of how you see some of those things play out.
I mean, I love this whole idea of workability because I've physically done tests myself when I've got a game improvement iron and a blade, and I have left, and I obviously with quad you can measure impact to the nth degree, and I've left face open and closed to a certain amount of degree, kept strike within a very small parameter, and affected what you actually see with a game improvement iron and a blade. Actually, tilt axis of the golf ball exactly the same. There's no difference in workability from that point of view. The difference is, though, where people don't understand is the fact what you were just saying, the difference between where the center of gravities are, is the fact that with a blade, you have the option of a more active face, where the game improvement iron just wants to deliver the same thing all the time. When you talk about a better player who can maneuver the face and has a better control of the face, that's what they actually mean effectively by workability, is the fact that they've got the ability to maneuver the head through impact better, where a game improvement iron just wants to be much more stable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's such a misunderstood thing. No, I love that. And that's why, again, you don't see a ton of, we'll talk about probably the best worker of the golf ball in the world. Tiger Woods plays a little bit of a longer blade, but at the same time, he manipulates that club face a lot. He doesn't necessarily change his club path. The club path is a part of it, but it's the path and the face in relation to that path is what's really going to affect that ball flight and whether it spins in one direction or another. So if the club wants to stay on track, if the club is in more control, then you just lost one of those parameters. You could put the same cut swing on a ball and it won't cut as much because the club doesn't want to move the same way. So it's a really interesting thing to understand, like the dynamics of a club and workability and what they need.
You sticking with the Max for now, Chris?
To me, the Max is what I've been looking for. Like, again, I'm a little bit fortunate in the fact that it's always, I'll say, if a player spins it too much, they're at a little bit of a disadvantage because they can only go one direction. Like, they're looking for something to bring spin down. As someone who naturally has, like, I hit up 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 degrees on the ball, so my spin rate is low, which gives me the ability to kind of benefit from some of the things that you get from a Max type design of that stability being one of them. If you're trying to design a head that's going to drive spin rate down, what happens to drive spin rate down is its sweet spot location, and it's moving that center of gravity more forward and more low. Again, that's moving mass closer to the face. When you move mass closer to the face, the MOI will drop. Like, that's just the physics behind it. There's a give and take in everything. So I'm lucky that I can benefit from a lot of the things that would be a hindrance of the Max from some players.
Yeah, and again, in testing with Keith and Ben, just 2 examples out of many. We gave all the guys both new heads to see how they performed. Keith walked away. They're still going to go away with their gamers, right? So Keith is an FCD guy, Ben's an STX guy. Then you've got Marco Penge as an STX guy. So we've already kind of split the players pretty evenly across those two. Heath walked away, left the Max behind, but took a G with him. Wanted to investigate a little bit more. That was hitting great ball speeds. Instantly just took to the G. Liked the sound of it, liked the flight, liked the fact he could shape it a little bit. Ben was the opposite. Ben left the G at the test and took the Max away with him. So again, 2 great players, 2 great ball strikers, and they immediately warmed to different things. And the fun thing, again, the interesting thing is the idea of feel and feedback. What Keith thought was great feel was this, and what Ben thought was great feel was that. They actually weren't the same thing.
I was just going to say, well, when you look at tour players have variants no different to amateur golfers. Amateur golfers have bigger variants because their club pass and face to pass, etc., and strike are much more varied and much bigger in their variants, but tour players still do vary. So, of course, as soon as you get 2 completely different tour players who deliver, say, maybe a couple of degrees up to a degree or so down, the spin rate requirements, they all hit the middle anyway, but the spin rate requirements are going to be massively different. And with the amount of adjustability that the Mizuno shaft gives, the hosel gives, the fact that you can dial in the launch conditions, but with the head, especially with the variants of how, you've got the G for ultra low spin, then you've got the Z, then the X, and obviously now the Max. You can now dial in properly the spin portion. So just having the Max there now, you've got, if we're just talking about tour players, but from the amateur's point of view, if you've got a slightly low swing speed player, which generally speaking, not many people swing a driver at 100 miles an hour, anything 90 miles an hour under, the added spin that the Max and the stability the Max is going to give is going to open up a completely different option. Because again, what Chris was saying before was the fact that with a G, hitting a decent shot with a G and it's spinning at 1200 RPM, well, that's just actually hit the ground. That's knuckleball. So you put the same dynamics that Chris is producing in that same driver, but then up clubhead speed by 20 miles an hour. Well, then spin orientated speed has now gone up, and that golf ball is absolutely flying out there. Again, I don't know what Chris's clubhead speed with the driver is, but from a point of view of an amateur golfer, if they swing even slower than that, the Max is a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean,
Just Chris, what is your speed?
My ball speed is I get around 158. So I'm on the I say higher side of amateurs. I've touched 160, but my goal is to get up above there more consistently. But again, I'm at the benefit of being able to have. I don't need to live in the 2,800 RPM range that a lot of players who are sub 100 miles an hour are better off being in, even though launch monitors. If you look at a total distance, I think a lot of people get fit too low a spin. So to me, I love to live in the 2,300 RPM range, and my ball speed, the Max gives me that, and it gives me that on a 9.5 in the standard setting. The face angle is what I like to see. It's exactly where it needs to be. With the Z, I was closer into that. I could get sub 2,000 with the Z, and that's why that cut went a little bit further. I would touch 1950, right around 2,000 on a straight shot, and if it turned over a little bit, it would kind of fall out of the sky quicker than I wanted. So again, that's where I want my straightest shot to fly the furthest, and then everything else you kind of go from there.
And that's the thing about...
moving on to fairway and hybrid, Chris, covered all the big stuff with the driver, right? Most people want to hear about that, and they're going to want to hear about these Mizuno Primes coming up. But you do an interesting thing with your fairways. You're an ST-MAX driver, but you have G fairway.
Yeah, I do have the G fairway, and you're right. It is a little bit of an interesting one. It's a little bit backwards, but my fairway wood journey has been an interesting one because I played the same fairway wood for a long time.
Did you have a 700?
I had an MX 700, which was, again, this is going way back. It was like the old yellow and black Mizuno one. But the interesting thing with mine, on the tour van, it was a MX 700, which was a very forgiving but a higher spin fairway wood. I had it turned down to 13 degrees. I had the face cranked wide open. So to me, the fairway wood, it's something that it's very I want it to be controllable, and I want it to go high, but I don't want it to spin very much. So on the driver, I want a little bit more spin. On the fairway wood, I want a little bit less spin. So I've got a 3-wood and a 5-wood in the STG. And honestly, like, the 3-wood is a T-ball club off the fairway. It's not the best for me because it's arguably too low a spin. The 5, if I'm in the fairway, I can probably carry the 5-wood further and carry the 3-wood. But the 3-wood is easier to turn over for me. So like the 3-wood off the tee is a really great one if I need to move the ball right to left. Like it's a very it fits me. I feel like it's what I've been looking for in a fairway wood for a long time.
Then interestingly, I've been a lot of fits recently where players have been walking away, tour players with various levels of tour, been walking away with max fairway woods with a different driver. They haven't already. I would say the vast majority have taken maybe a G or sticking with their ZRX in the driver. But that level of play, I've seen an awful lot of ST-MAX fairway woods going into play.
It's interesting. To me, it's probably a lot of what's the fairway wood being used for. You know, again, for a lot of those bombers who are, you know, just absolutely crush the ball. Like who I'll use Marco for an example. Like, he's a guy who he could play whatever because he hits it so far. His fairway wood is all about control. My fairway wood is not as much about control because I hit my driver straight enough. Like, I'm a pretty straight driver of the golf ball. I'm not scared of a tight fairway. Like, I'm more likely to pull out my driver than I am my 3-wood on a tight fairway. I use my 3-wood kind of for a more specific shot than that. Tour players are a lot different. I feel like a lot of tour players, they're backing up to a 3-wood because it's about the control aspect of it.
Tell us a little bit about this ST-MAX fairway wood, Chris. The basics, still composite crown. A little bit lower profile again.
Yeah, I've actually got 3 fairway woods in my hand. It's not going to show much right here, but yeah,
they're off again.
Black. Yeah, right. So STZ fairway wood, I'd say this lived in that. I'm going to call it the mid-spin range of like what fairway woods are now. Again, we talked about drivers. Too many people getting fit for too low a spin in the driver. I feel like that's commonplace in the fairway wood as well. That a lot of people, and again, I might have just talked myself into being that person who fit myself into too low a spin of fairway wood. But I'll say that a lot of fairway woods right now are designed for launch monitors, the ones that get ultra low spin rates. This one is not ultra low. I'd say it's mid-low. The STG is the more ultra low one, titanium construction with the stainless steel sole plate. The ST-MAX, this is going to be in that mid-spin range. So this is going to be one that's going to be more controllable, more stable, launches easier, goes higher, and just kind of like, it's not a high spin fairway wood, but it's higher than the G significantly. The tech behind it, you know, it is a miraging steel face similar to the STZ. Really great ball speed off of that miraging steel face. A composite crown that actually wraps all the way around to the toe as well. So I don't know if you can see it on here very well, but it wraps around to the toe. And again, that's all about just saving as much mass as possible to concentrate back. And so just like on the driver, mass back equals more stability, higher MOI. And on top of that, it's got that Core-Tech chamber that's been kind of more optimized for this head shape, very central around that sweet spot. So again, really consistent ball speeds with this one. Launches easier and the feel is phenomenal with it. And I should mention, it's a little bit bigger footprint too.
Yeah. And in other news, 7-wood?
There is a 7-wood. Yeah, I'll say that's another thing is how better players are using fairway woods has changed a lot. It's funny to watch like the cycles of
repeat.
Yeah, like driving irons are the thing, and then hybrids are the thing, and fairway woods are the thing. And you know, I can just picture myself growing up. Like, I remember when I was just getting into golf, the 7-wood was like the greatest club on earth because it just went high and it spun, and it was so easy. So, but as I got better, as I got more accomplished, I started hitting more shots and gaining head speed. In reality, the biggest thing I started to see was that a 7-wood and even a 5-wood, good players don't play those golf clubs. That was like I can't play a 5-wood. It's going to go like this. It's not going to carry. It spins too much. fairway woods now do not spin like they used to. So with that in mind, you see better players hitting fairway woods because they're getting the launch out of it without too much spin. And I'll say Mizuno hasn't had a 7 wood that a better player could look at, I don't know if ever. So we've added the 7 wood to the max range. Again, it's not a super high spin, but it's a mid spin on that 7 wood. But it's something that I think a lot of players can fit into their bag on top of, some of the hybrids that they have been playing.
I watched OJ Farrell hit 7 wood last week. He's probably give Marco a run for his money on ball speeds. I was watching, it was pretty humiliating. I was watching OJ knock it out there about sort of 280, and I said it was like 165 ball speed. It was something, and under control as well.
Jeez,
and that was under serious consideration to go out to play. So when you got people like OJ hitting 7 wood, then there's probably a message for all of us.
Absolutely. And with a 7 wood, you can open the face too with the adjustable hosel. Like having that 7 wood that is going to launch high and not spin too much. It's just great for these players like hitting into par 5s and stuff like that. It's a really good golf club. And it's amazing how many 7 woods have worked its way onto the tours.
The club I haven't seen too much of, and we haven't been testing with tour players, is the ST-MAX hybrid, because at that point in their bag, those players tend to look in that area. Can you just give us a brief rundown of that? So again, this is not composite crown. This is slightly different.
Yeah, a lot of the things, the general concept behind the ST-MAX hybrid is it hands right off what I talked about on the driver and the fairway wood. A little bit larger footprint, a little bit more inviting at address. I'll say that the STZ hybrid came on the heels of the CLK. So it was kind of bringing the CLK to the ST family. And when we did that, we kind of kept the CLK profile, which is still very much a player's profile. It is a smaller golf club. It's a little bit intimidating, particularly when you get into these stronger lofts, the 16, the 19, stuff like that. They're kind of scary golf clubs. The ST-MAX, it's not that. For that player looking for a hybrid to replace a long iron or to kind of bridge that gap between a fairway wood, these are inviting. They're easier to hit. They're going to launch a little bit higher. They're going to spin more. It does not have the composite crown. It's got what we call a waffle crown design. And in all honesty, that's because when you get to a footprint like this, as opposed to a driver, when you do composite, there's a requirement of like a lip around the composite, adhesive around that lip, and all these things to put that composite into place, where
that's heavier than the crown.
Yeah, the weight savings you get from putting a lighter crown, but all these other things end up being a wash, if not a negative. So with this, we're actually able to, in the casting process, cast a waffle shape that you can't see underneath this, that again just gets us to minimum thickness values that allow us to move that mass low and deep, and so while still maintaining durability. So again, you can't see it, but it's as thin as you could possibly get. So this thing, it's a really nice looking hybrid. I won't lie, it's probably not going to be in my bag. Like it just doesn't quite have a spot in my bag. But for a lot of players, it really does, especially because we go up higher in loft as well. So we're up to a 28 degree in this one. So, we haven't had that hybrid for the slower swing speed player getting up in those lofts even ever that I remember. So
nice.
I'm looking forward to that. That's the one thing, if anything, I'm looking forward to that is the hybrid, definitely. Is because I played 3 and 4 hybrid. So I am a relatively strongish swing speed player, but even I don't use a 4 iron and 3 iron. I transition from 5 blade all the way then to 4 hybrid. And I'm looking for a certain type of hybrid that's going to give me versatility, plenty of spin if I need it, but also I can work it up and down. The current hybrids that I've got work really well, but as Chris said, they're quite small, and I'd like the look of something just a little bit bigger, and I'm looking forward to getting to the Max hybrids to see what difference they make.
Talk to me about in the fitting world right now. What do you see people like? Are they asking for more fairway woods? Are they still excited about hybrids? Like what are you experiencing?
Yes. From an amateur point of view, I mean, there's always this classic thing of I don't want to use 7 woods and stuff like that, but then you get 2 different parts of the market. You get sort of the older generation, which are used to playing like 9 woods and stuff like that, and of course you don't see them anymore. The fact that Mizuno now are bringing in a 7 wood, I mean, I can't help but when you go on social media, and because obviously all the bits and pieces are out there already, that everyone's quite excited the fact that Mizuno are bringing a 7-wood, and I've just literally just done a video a few weeks ago just talking about the difference between 3-wood and 7-wood at different speeds. So swung at fast swing speed, middle swing speed, and slow swing speed. And there's a point where the 7-wood actually goes further than the 3-wood. And so the fact that Mizuno are now bringing in a 7-wood is a great idea for amateur golfers, because a lot of golfers don't swing anywhere near as fast as they need to use a 3-wood functionally, and then bring in the 7-wood, and it brings that lovely high launch, lots and lots of peak height, loads of control going into a green. Ball wants to land and stop rather than just chase through the back. From that point of view, the customer needs to be more, kind of not educated, but kind of pushed towards trying it. And as soon as they do go down that route of pushing towards something like a 7-wood, you can't deny the benefits that a 7-wood will give.
Right. Yeah.
And they're no different to the hybrid as well, because that's when people are used to using 3 irons and 4 irons. You put hybrids in their bag and they're like, oh, no, I don't want to try that. Just give it a go. Oh, no, I don't like it. Just try it. And then you see their faces. You see, well, look at the difference between your 3 iron. You're swinging a 7 iron at 78 miles an hour. You're still using a 3 iron. That thing is, I can near enough jump over the golf ball at peak height. And you then stick a hybrid in their bag, and the wins they get are just crazy.
I love the number of options that we have now in that, it's not even middle part of that bag, that the upper part of that transition part of the bag, between going for a more forgiving model with the deeper CG, just in the iron world, like a 225, or if you're a better player, or a hot metal pro, or a hot metal, those hit one window. A hybrid hits another window. The Z and the Max hit 2 different windows. Then the Z and the Max Fairways get 2 different windows from there. I didn't even mention the Mizuno Pro Fli-Hi, that fits in there as well. So now, in that super tricky part where players are approaching a loft that they may not be able to handle, you could make up for it with center gravity location, spin rates, and also lengths and weights and all that stuff. Between a 4 iron and a 4 hybrid and a 4 fairway wood or 3 fairway wood, you got massively different lengths and massively different weights. All these different levers that a fitter has at their disposal to kind of dial somebody in. It's almost a requirement to be able to get someone right.
It's a massive part of the game. If you look at Arcos data and look at the distribution of approaches that amateur golfers have, that point of the longer shot, whether it be the 3 on the 4 on the 3 hybrid and stuff like that, that is such a commonplace shot for amateur golfers to play in, hole out, that having something like a hybrid, which has got roll and bulge, for example, the forgiveness difference that you get from a face which has got roll and got curvature to it, it's just night and day when you put that up against a straight face 3 iron. The launch they get from it, if you hit high on the face on a 3 iron, dead. Good luck on that. You hit high on the face on a 3 or 4 iron, a 4 hybrid, it launches high. The gearing works and just launches high with slightly less spin, and it goes the same distance anyway they're expecting it to. It's just a win-win on that side of it. But they've just got to be, they kind of got to be pushed to try it more than anything else. And as soon as they do try it and they come away from what they've always known and understand what modern day tech as such can give, and the fact that now Mizuno do offer all the different options, even down to 7-wood, exciting times.
I love that you talk about, it's such an overlooked thing, the benefit of something as simple as bulge and roll. Bulge and roll are massively your friend when you're looking for, launch and control, when you're getting into clubs that are longer and harder to hit. So, the fact that the hybrid has, bulge and roll in it, a Mizuno Pro Fli-Hi, again, you're getting launch, but you're not getting the benefit of the bulge and roll on it. So that high and low impact are still on a flat face golf club. And, it's such an overlooked and simple thing that honestly, I bet most golfers don't even realize their faces aren't flat on their hybrids and fairway woods. But the benefit of such a simple engineering tweak is just so big in terms of getting more control out of those.
I'm going to move the conversation on to irons. It's a nice little join. We've gone dry fairway hybrid. So for what would be the main course for a lot of people, and one of the more anticipated launches and drawn out launches in Mizuno history, the Mizuno Pro 240 series. You've obviously been watching from a distance there, Jay. You've even done a preview video without any samples.
Yeah, I did. Well, again, it was just done from everything has been posted on the internet because everyone is itching to see what this new 241, 243, 245 looks like. how it behaves, how the technology has changed and stuff like that, what the aesthetic differences are. And so, of course, as soon as it launched in Japan, everyone was rushing onto Google to try and work out where the translate button is. And they were trying to work out what's the difference between this one. I mean, the 245, I know Chris is probably going to go into it. I'm really looking forward to the 245 because the technology differences within 245, when I do my reviews and I'm kind of mapping the face of see how forgiving one is, and just obviously because we're aware of Mizuno, the great thing with head technology is the quad doesn't lie. And so whether it does well or it doesn't do well, you could obviously attribute why. Well, the 245, with its massive increase in tungsten, I am really looking forward to putting these irons head to head towards other ones that have possibly, with the change that they've done over the last 2 years, because obviously 225 now is a 2-year life cycle and it's come to the end. Other manufacturers have moved on a little bit. And okay, when you're looking at comparative difference between 225 and say something like P790 or something like that, there are slight differences now where the 225 is getting a little bit long in the tooth. But with the change with tungsten, I'm really interested to see how well that thing does.
And that's where the technology of the whole 2.4 series, it's a lot of getting smaller, but doing more with smaller. And, when you talk about smaller, physics and densities are what they are. And, if you make a golf club smaller, you're giving yourself fewer levers to play with. So you need to concentrate mass in a different way than just having, a thicker portion in the hollow or whatever. So like you mentioned with the 245, the amount of tungsten that's concentrated low and deep. And honestly, it's interesting where it's located. It's not even like touching the sole. It's as low as it can be to not hinder the flex of the sole. And it's as deep as it can be to not hinder the flex of the sole as well. So that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to give the face the maximum amount of, trampoline size, the maximum amount of deflection as possible. So it's going to feel great. It's going to pop off great. But at the same time, because we concentrated so much mass deep, it's going to spin a little bit more. And again, I've talked about that, like even going back to the woods, I've talked about more spin. More spin is your friend as lofts have gotten so strong. Again, many people are getting fit into irons where, it used to be, 7-iron spin rate is 7,000 RPM. Like that was the old rule of thumb. And now all of a sudden, fitters are accepting 3,800 RPM out of a 7-iron, acting like that's a good thing. And it's crazy how as loft gets stronger, spin rate naturally goes with it. So when we get stronger, plus we get smaller, you have to pull other levers. And multi-material and the use of concentrations of tungsten are massive. So comparing it to the 225, which is a great golf club, I play the 225. It launches high, like I'm just talking the 225, launches high, but if anything, I'd say it spins a touch too low for me. So where, coming out of the rough, it's possible for one to kind of shoot on it because I'm like on a borderline acceptable, but borderline too low a spin. 245 should bring that spin rate up a little bit in a better looking head as well. So to me, it's like, it's everything you'd want out of that type of golf club.
I'm going to pull the conversation just back a shade, Chris.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, listen, you've covered half of it before we needed before I had a schedule, which saves me a lot of questions. One of the things that stood out to me is this story, this relationship between Mizuno and Chuo, which is in Hiroshima. So we've done an awful lot of concept filming for this launch because the story of the clubs runs. It's not just about design; it's about the execution of that design in the real world. So, for instance, it is possible to design incredibly thin faces, and it's possible in the CAD world to do certain things. To execute that in a manufacturing place, specifically within a forging environment, that's a lot more complex and a lot more complicated, right, to actually pull off. And as David's explained it, and we've done some beautiful video work with David where he took us for a forging factory tour, closer than we've been allowed to go before. We haven't really been able to share too much detail because there's a lot of kind of trade secrets in there. But we were able to get into the factory back in June and shoot more than we've ever been allowed to shoot before. So hopefully people will come and watch that video and do the full tour of the factory. But it was very specific to, and David's storytelling was great on it. He gave us a great narrative, which was it's about the execution of the ideas and is almost bigger than the idea itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, with with Mizuno, there are so many things that come along with making a Mizuno golf club. It's just a given that the look and the feel are, so ingrained in terms of what we do. And feel comes a lot from our materials, comes a lot from our process as well. That grain flow forging that, we create with the Chuo Koyo factory in Hiroshima. Like, it's something that we have taken ownership over. So as the performance requirements and tech requirements of skill levels have changed, meaning like it used to be you could just shove a ton of tech into the game improvement stuff and a player just wants a blade. They don't want COR, they just want blah, blah, blah. That's not the case anymore. Like, you need tech at all levels of the game. So if you can execute tech in a better player's look and feel, you've really done something. And that's where casting and forging, there was always the debate there, casting, yet there's more levers to pull in casting, because when you're pouring a liquid into a mold, you're working in 3 dimensions. That mold can have 3 dimensions. When you're working with forgings, you're working in 2 dimensions, because a forging hammer has to come in and out of that. That being said, you can do stuff in the post-processing side to overcome that 3rd dimension. And that's some of the stuff we've done, like the 243 and the 245, is almost taken away some of those limitations that used to live in the forging world. So a lot of that comes from how the club is put together, but a lot of that also comes from what we've been able to do and execute with Chuo, because Chuo is so skilled at how they create the molds, the processes of the mold, the processes of the positioning of the clubs and the stamping jigs even, or the forging jigs. There's so many things that go into making it that what used to be a hindrance, like it used to be a limitation on how you could create a club, it's not a limitation anymore. So now it's like, how can you unlock even more out of a forging? And then you get the tech, plus you get the feel. And when you combine those 2 things, then it's like, why would a player not want to experience that? You can get the distance, but you know exactly where on the face you hit it. You can learn from that. You get the feedback. You can get the control. That's really when you're doing something special. So that's where, again, I think David said it better than I've ever heard anyone say it the other day, or when he was filming the video, when he said, the debate used to always be cat versus forged. Now forge is just thrown all over the place, because a lot of players will forge one part of something and tell you the whole golf club is forged. We don't do that. We're forging the parts that matter, forging the parts that are going to deliver the forged feel, the forged feedback. So by forging the face and neck and having that continuity of the grain, that's where grain flow forging comes from. That's where the Mizuno feel comes from. So our forgings are different than a lot of things that stay forged out there. And again, that comes from the engineering from Mizuno. That comes from the engineering from Chuo. We can't leave them out of it. They're not just, hey, make this. No, we're working with them to overcome some things that we used to not be able to overcome. So to me, that's where the 2-4 series unlocks a lot of things that were theoretical, and now they're actually executable.
Nicely put. I'm looking at the slide with the 3 models and their various stages of production. So you can see the copper underlaying.
Yeah.
With the 223, you can see the little milling in the back. With 243, with 245, you can see the components of it. And obviously 241 is a very different beast again. Just a really nicely put together blade. Well, what people are going to notice on first look, Chris, if I hand the first 3 models over, what's the obvious impression? What are you going to take away first?
What are you comparing it to? Comparing it to the
prior generations. I think that's the fairest barometer.
Yeah, the first thing I noticed comparing it to prior generations is across the board, these got smaller. They got more compact, they got cleaner. So usually when you're talking about technology, you go the other direction. It's a lot easier to pull off thinness and extreme center of gravities when you make a club bigger, because say the club gets longer from front to back, the sole gets wider, you naturally made that center of gravity deeper. If you can make that center of gravity deeper when the sole get narrower, that's different. And that's, to me, what you notice more than anything of these is the 2-2 series were phenomenal golf clubs. The 2-4 series took everything that was good about them and made it better. It made them smaller, it made them softer, but it made them do more. So to me, it's like the first thing you notice is the size. They look small, and then you hit it, and it's like shocking because it doesn't do what a golf club that looks like that is supposed to do.
Now, we're going to start, we'll work our way through. We won't do the natural sequence of 1, 3, 5. We're going to start with the 3, because when we first spoke about it, the 3 was kind of held up as probably the model that had the most improvement and the most noticeable gains over the prior model. So I'm looking at the CGI, the kind of cutaway. So first view, thinner face, and how do we get to there then, Chris? That's forged and then milled post-production?
Yeah, so we use what we call our like micro slot milling. We go in through the sole side, and when you go in through the sole side, you're able to run a milling tool parallel to the face. Parallel to the face is important because you're getting a uniform thickness across that face. You know, in previous clubs that, like, I'll talk about, like, even going way back, MX23, MX300, like, you know, previous generations and even JPX forging, we went in through the cavity. And when you go in through the cavity, you're not running parallel to the face because you have to get around the top line. So those faces got thin, but they got thin at small points. By going in from the sole side, we're getting thin across a span, across an area. So that's going to give us a larger core area. It's going to give you more consistency as well. So then if you can do that, it's also doing it in a one-piece club. That's to me the big thing is you can get some quote-unquote forged golf clubs that have thin faces in the market, but most of the time they're forging just the face part, and then it's welded to a cast neck and a cast back and all those things that aren't going to give you the continuity of grains and the consistency of feel. So with 243, you're getting all of those things.
Now I'm looking at just a picture of the club now. Really compact iron compared to prior. So what size-wise is there? Again, is there a comparison prior models?
I don't know, like a percentage-wise or like, you know, a measurement-wise, but it's noticeable. I mean, I'll talk from my own game. Like, I was always been a forged cavity back player, a smaller golf club player. I've never been a blade guy. I've never been a big club player. I always lived in like a JPX Tour, an MP62, MP64. I was very excited about 223, but I ended up going to 225 because the size difference wasn't very big. Like, to me, the 223 looked a little bit on the chunkier side. The 243 does not. The 243 looks smaller. It looks more like my old 62s. So it's significantly thinner looking at a dress, and the sole width itself got thinner also.
You've done some stuff with bounce as well, am I right? There's a little change in the surf interaction?
Yeah, we're always looking at kind of what are the trends in terms of specs. And again, like, a spec change isn't an exciting change, but it's one that you have to keep your eye on because trends happen. And excuse me, you know, with the bounce on this whole line, we got thinner. We got thinner with them. And when you go thinner on the sole, you want to make sure you still have the control of the sole, how it enters and exits the turf. So if you get thin and have too little bounce, it could tend to get diggy. So we added a little bit of bounce to all of these. That gives you a couple of things. It gives you a little bit more speed through the turf. It also gives you the ability to combo them a lot better as well, because if you're starting on too low a bounce and you're comboing it with, let's say, a 245, you're going to end up needing to kind of strengthen and weaken depending on which side you're coming from. And when you strengthen with too little bounce, then all of a sudden you might have no bounce, and then you're really in trouble. So it's always important to kind of look at specs like that. So we did add a bounce across the board.
And there's a little sole grind that wasn't there before?
There is. So you're talking on the 243. Here's one right here. There's a trailing edge grind across the back of this. And again, that's just making sure that when you add bounce, you're still getting playability out of the sole. You're still getting the speed of entering and exiting the turf. Because it does have the milled micro slot, the sole width itself, when you get into the longer irons, does get a touch wider. Again, I talked about raising the spin rates on golf clubs. That CG depth is an important thing. So you want to have a little bit of width on those long irons, but you don't want it to play like a wide-soled iron because it's transitioning down to like a one-piece grain flow forward short iron. So we beveled across that trailing edge so that it enters and exits the turf really cleanly.
I don't think the camera did that iron a lot of favors there. I think it ends up looking a lot fatter on camera than it truly is. What you got there? That's a 5. Okay.
Well, I'm holding a 5, and I did that on purpose. I brought 5 irons, which if you're wanting to show off how thin a club looks, you typically don't pull a 5 iron. But I pulled the 5s because tech is at the forefront of a 5 iron. You know, if I pull up 9 irons, like, you don't need that much tech, and the tech is really being executed differently on a 5 iron than it is on a 9 iron.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was the loft transitions and the distance gapping in the 2-2-3 versus the 2-4-3. Is it with a little bit of work been done on the short irons as well, just to kind of power it up almost a little bit?
You know, I'll talk about, you know, another fitter who's, you know, well known in the industry. Ian Fraser did a video when the 2-2-3s came out, and his video was talking about kind of how the set transitions from start to finish. And he talked about the performance of the long irons, and then I don't want to say the lack of performance of the scoring irons, but the scoring irons did something very different. And part of that, honestly, it comes down to spec. You know, we from Mizuno, and I'll say that, you know, we can get caught in our own world and how we've done things every once in a while. And it was all about transitioning down to a 46-degree wedge. Like, that was almost the hallmark of a Mizuno Pro, a 46-degree wedge, because that from that 46, then you can transition down to, you know, 51, 56, 60, whatever your normal transitions were. But because the technology of the 2-2-3 was so different, with that chromoly material, with the one-piece forging and that micro slot, it's a player's distance golf club. Like, distance is an element in it. So we were taking players' distance long irons and connecting them almost too much to, I call it, player scoring irons. So we did strengthen the scoring irons ever so slightly just to make those transitions a lot cleaner.
And material-wise, there's a material breakthrough the set, right? So 4-7 iron, we're still 4-1-20 chromoly. Mm-hmm. And then 8 to gap wedge. So though we strengthened the loft, we are still with the pure select mark carbon still.
Correct. Yeah. Again, you're working your way towards those players, like, you know, towards the grain flow forward wedge or something like that. And what I'll say is it's chromoly where you need it, and it's 1025 where you want it. You know, as they're all on the stronger side, when you start to add loft, the benefit of COR diminishes, because, you know, if you think about how COR is measured, and again, to get into like the technical stuff, a COR is a rebound speed to a parallel face. So if it's, you know, 0.83 COR is that number that most people know. And, you know, these live in like the 0.81 range in the longer irons. That means a ball shot at 100 miles an hour comes back at 81 miles an hour. That's the way COR is measured. But all of a sudden, when you're talking scoring irons, when you're talking about, you know, not 0 degrees of loft, you're talking 27, 28, 29, 30, working way up to like, you know, 44 degrees or something like that. That benefit is almost negligible of what the COR is going to do. So what we chose to do when you get into where the COR starts to not really matter as much, we gave you a little bit softer material there, and that's transitioning from the chromoly to that 1025 mild carbon steel, that pure select.
Looks wise, giving me slight MP25 vibes.
And for good reason, honestly. Like 25, I'll say that was a transitional product for us, where we went from, again, 25, we went from a milling from the sole side in the MX54 to a milling from underneath in MX25. So it's very much a leap like that was. I'll say that a lot of people didn't realize how much was going on the 25. And it's funny, we were talking about Sea Island earlier. Jonathan Yon, one of our young players, he's an MX25 player still to this day, although he's transitioning into some of the new stuff.
Nice. We did an interesting experiment over there, didn't we? So we had Luke, Donald, Ben Griffin, Keith Mitchell, 3 very, very good ball strikers. We worked through the sets, Jay, and everyone concluded what they liked and what they thought their bag would be. And then we went back and we kind of gave them a slightly more forgiving model and asked them to train it. We tried to get them to describe why they wouldn't play the more forgiving iron. And the majority of the feedback, Chris, wasn't it, was, oh, you know, I'd like to control my launch a bit. I like to control trajectory. I like to shake the ball. So as much as I think this is a great iron, I'm going to stick with these because these give me everything that I need. we actually challenged them to hit some of those shots with the more forgiving models. It was pretty. I won't give it all away, but it was a pretty interesting test, wasn't it, Chris? And it left her. I'm sure there are other reasons why you might play a 2-4-1 over a 2-4-3, a 2-4-5, but those reasons are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and harder to justify and isolate, aren't they, Chris? When they come to the end of that test, there was a little bit of head scratching going on.
Yeah, it definitely, we're starting to blur the lines, and a lot of the old school feelings of why I must be a blade guy or I must be a shallow cavity guy, a lot of those things that came with those are being overcome with technology. And I'm sure Jay can speak that from the fitting world of how do you sneak technology in on somebody who doesn't think they want it?
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I'm a blade player. I love blades. I've always played really blades within reason, and I just like the profile, I like the aesthetics, I like the feel, I like the whole idea of blades. But as I get older, and it becomes more and more difficult to swing at the same speed every single year, there definitely will come a time when I've got to accept the help of technology. And when you're talking about amateur golfers who don't swing 7 irons at 92 miles an hour as a normal, and they're swinging at 72, 82 miles an hour, then yeah, the help that technology can give, especially even with a smaller player's iron that the Mizuno Pro has always been, but they're getting even smaller with the added tech in there. It means that, again, you don't necessarily have to go all the way to JPX to get all the help. You've got all the help in with the tungsten of 245 and the micro slot in 243 that's going to give you a little bit more extra ball speed at your slightly slower clubhead speed to give you the help that you need.
Just when you get a chance, Jay, watch this test with Luke, Ben, and Keith. 3 guys with all retaining their speed, and there's no physical diminishments going on. But it was a really interesting experiment, and I'm sure these guys, they're such good players. They find the middle of the face so easily. They have so much control. There will still be a reason, but we again, year by year, model by model, those reasons are disappearing to play that blade, I think. Interesting evolution of the whole thing. Okay, so 245, Chris, interesting. First look, very, very hard to tell it apart from the 241, which is why I think you've moved the logo.
Yeah, it's funny from it was a request from our manufacturing side, building custom golf clubs, making sure that they're not easily, but that they are clearly differentiatable, if that's a word, but easy to differentiate from one to the other. So with the 245, as it got even smaller compared to the 225, we did actually move a logo just to give like 1 point of reference to make sure you're looking at the right one. Again, the 245, it is so small and compact compared to what it does. It looks the part of a blade, but it does so much more.
So tell us a little bit about the construction then, Chris. Why did we go on the more technical end, on the sort of low end of the clubs, the
Sure.
3, 4, 5?
Yeah, so, it's a combo set built in because the construction kind of changes throughout. I talked about earlier about the what is forging and what do you want and what do you expect out of a forging, and the continuity of grains over a long area is a key to that. So with that, on the 245, which is the highest COR iron we've made in this Mizuno Pro line, you have the long continuous grains all the way from the toe up the neck because they forged face and neck, forged out of that chromoly material. So you're going to get a ton of feel, a ton of feedback, a ton of consistency from that. So you have a forged face and neck with a welded back piece with a piece of a large slug of tungsten embedded deep within this back portion, and it's embedded as low and deep as possible. Low and deep means it's going to launch easier and it's going to spin a touch more. So all of these things of a golf club that looks very thin, but it performs like it's a lot thicker than it is because of the mass concentrated so low and deep. So in the longer irons, you have that tungsten. Essentially, the 8-iron is like a transition golf club because the 8-iron still features that grain flow forged face and neck with the welded back piece. The tungsten drops off, and that's just step 1 as you're working towards grain flow forged scoring irons in the 9, pitch, and gap, which are a forged face, neck, and back with what we call a half hollow design, where the welded back piece goes from being this entire back piece to literally just this portion. So the hollowness starts to go away. And again, it all speaks to what's the COR doing throughout it? What are the CG requirements for a given loft throughout the set? and how do you transition those as seamlessly as possible so that you don't have any jumps in performance throughout your set. So all of these are grain flip forwards, all of these are going to have feel, but you're going to have like really crazy ball speeds on the longer irons that transition down to really, really controllable scoring irons.
And we're going to see the biggest difference here to the prior generation really going to be ball speed.
It's going to be ball speed, but to me, the biggest difference is the look. I mean, it looks smaller, it looks thinner, it looks more like a blade. Like, to me, that's more impressive than the ball speed. You know, yes, the ball speed is there. Yes, we did boost the ball speed in the longest irons. If you're talking like a 7 iron or a mid iron, because we're transitioning down, you don't necessarily want max ball speed on your 7 iron or max ball speed on your 8 iron. You want to have smooth steps with your ball speed. So the most of the technology lives in the longer irons, then it transitions its way down.
Good news for lefties.
We have it in lefties. Yes, exactly. We have the 241 and the 245 in left-handed. So, last generation we had the 223. So now over the last 2 cycles, we've kind of had the entire Mizuno Pro line.
Which takes us nicely onto the 241, which is the other lefty model in this setup. Now, much more traditional iron, much more conventionally Mizuno. What we're seeing different to the prior, again, it's got a slight MP5 vibes to me, looking at some of the weight placement. But also we're talking about a narrow top line, right? And noticeably narrow top line.
It's funny when USGA conformance list images come out, how people kind of latch on to something. And the first thing people latched on to was the MP5 vibes of this. MP5, phenomenal golf club, still, really good feel, really cool look, but I'll say it wasn't exactly a blade. The history of the MP5 is it was designed off of MP64 and MP62, those clubs that were that shallow cavity design where the size was a little bit larger. It was more like a shallow cavity head size. Excuse me. The 241 is coming straight off the 221, which is very small and compact, and this got even smaller. The vibe of MP5 kind of came from the lighting and kind of how it hits because of the transition on this, what we call our tapered blade design, where the upper portion of the blade kind of fans out, like it goes out towards the top line. There's good and bad when you're talking about meet high in the golf club. Meet high, typically in a blade, is a scary thing because you think thicker top line, but it looks even thinner because we beveled this off very aggressively. The thing and the reason we do it is because that raises the center of gravity. I talked about adding spin on a lot of these models. Adding spin is a good thing. Adding spin gives you better launch and also gives you more control.
And I'm noticing here in the notes that I'm going to see the biggest change in size is probably going to be on the mid and short irons.
Yeah, we continue to, I'll say, refine our scoring irons. You go way back in the day of like some of the nostalgic irons from Mizuno, the 14s, the 29s, the 33s. We lived in the big scoring iron world, high heel, high toe, kind of boxy look. And we continue to evolve that to get smaller and smaller and more compact and thinner and sleeker. And it's really noticeable in the scoring irons. The pitching wedge of this looks nothing like an old school Mizuno pitching wedge. The 9 iron, the 8 iron, they transition so different than how we used to transition them to. And that's, to me, like, the 8 iron to me is the set that like makes or break, or the club that makes or breaks a set. The 8 iron tells you where it's going to go from the 7 iron side, where it's going to go from the pitching wedge side. And again, that's being a picky club engineer, like obsessed over the looks and the aesthetics. But the 8 iron tells you everything you need to know. And to me, this 8 iron got a little bit straighter lined. It got more compact. It got very, I'd call it like almost angular, which I love, like as opposed to like a round 8 iron.
And the other thing I picked up is that kind of the thing that we're going to see the most of or notice more than anything else I've looked is probably going to be the feel, right? That thicker portion behind impacts.
Yeah, I mean, when you go smaller, the great thing of going smaller on a muscle back is you have mass to play with. Like, unlike a, game improvement iron where you're trying to thin out everywhere, with a muscle back, you make it smaller. You just make portions thicker. The portions we wanted to make thicker were directly behind impact. directly behind impact, going to be a more solid feel. It's going to give you that longer duration of vibration, which gives you just more feedback and more feel.
Yeah, we've got one more club to get through, but I think we'll park that for now and maybe come back another time because your time's pretty tight, which is the Fli-Hi, which really, in summary, kind of a better, faster, prettier version of what came before. It's been a pretty popular club anyway, right?
Yeah, the MP Fli-Hi, it does a lot of really good things. I'll say the non-contract club that's gotten the most play from Mizuno over the last couple of years has been the Fli-Hi. It's snuck into so many players' bags. It's unbelievable because it has the Mizuno look, it has the Mizuno feel, and it has crazy performance. Again, I'm not going to breeze over it too much because it has that miraging steel face. It is not a forged golf club, but it's not trying to be. Like, it's trying to be a little bit more. So this is more like a bridge between that strongest iron and that hybrid or that fairway wood, because it has a thinner face. Again, loads of tungsten, low and deep. That black color is going to make it look a little bit smaller and addressed. And, it's just got a great feel and very explosive golf club.
Amazing what the color does. There's still a few 225 black sets floating out there. If there's any collectors out there trying to pick something up,
that's
the difference in look between the black and the chrome's incredible, isn't it?
Oh,
yes, and you were playing them in that match as well, and it was noticed.
Well, it's funny, I talked about I was always a shallow cavity guy, and then on the 223, I chose the 225 over the 223 because the look was so similar. But when I went to the 225 black, that looks even smaller. So to me, like a 225 black looked even smaller than a 223 chrome. So it's like, to me, it was a no-brainer to go into that one.
And what's landed in the bag for next year? Have you made a choice yet?
I'm building up to the 243s right now. That's what I've been looking for. I wanted to love 223, but like I said, I found my way to 225. But 243 kind of overcomes a few of the objections I had. Not objections, but a few of the kind of things that I was looking for that 223 didn't quite have.
Jay, anything there stayed with you?
241s for me.
Nice.
Old blade meet new blade.
Yeah, I'm looking forward because obviously I'm over the aesthetics, mainly obviously with the blade, and the finish on the 241 is different to the 221 as far as I'm aware.
Right. It's a fully satin chrome as opposed to like a mirror on the back.
Looking forward to see what that looks like because I'm a chromey guy. I like old school.
Nice. So have you experimented with? I know you said you go blade to the 5-iron. Talk to me about what happens when you get like a shallow cavity 5-iron.
See, I've done an experiment myself about going 221, 225, but having 2 7-irons and having the 225 7-iron half-inch longer. So it plays like because of the gappings so I don't have to then mess around with bending lofts or anything else. I don't have to worry about bounce, change, offset change, or anything else like that. And actually, if it wasn't for the feel difference, and I'm obviously being a blade player, that's why I stop at 5, because past the 5 I can't justify using a 4. It just comes into a green, and I want something that I can control. Goes to a 4 hybrid and it comes in so much higher, so much easier. But it's that transition of coming away from that blade, and if I was to be able to put 10 miles an hour swing speed on and I could hit a 3-iron and hit button every single time, I'd play a 3-iron blade. Because there's nothing nicer than hitting a blade right out the screws. So, yeah, that's why I transition out 5. But I've done the test myself, and even though I can definitely see an improvement, going to a 225, keeping the lofts exactly the same as what they should be if they were 221, but splitting it, there's definite advantages going 225 over 221. It's just that where I am at the moment, there's just not quite enough advantage. Okay, if I was to take swing speed off as I get older, then there's going to be a distinct advantage. And that's when people can learn to split their sets properly, blend properly, and get the most out of everything.
So that's our engineering goal going forward, is to give you a 5-iron that will replace your muscle back. So I like it that we've got kind of a line in the sand drawn right now.
Yeah.
We know what we have to do.
I'm quite happy. I want to keep my 7 blade all the time, but 6 and 5, I'll leave it to you.
There you go. Perfect.
So when are we going to see all this kit then, Chris? I believe that a lot of the Mizuno fitting centers will probably get some fitting heads just prior to Christmas. Maybe not in time to actually do any fittings, but the first fit heads are going out, and then we're looking what sort of back end of January before the first custom fits sets are being set up.
So in the States, our pre-order is, I believe it's January the 8th, and then shipping the week of January 25th. So that's kind of when they'll be hitting the shelves, and you can look for them in the States. In the UK, your dates are similar, but maybe like a day or two off.
We might be a week or two out, but it won't be too far different. And ST-MAX Woods, we may be looking early February, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yeah. So we're going to have these. If you happen to be down in Orlando and make your way there, swing by and hit the ST-MAX and give it a try out on that big old driving range. And they're going to be hitting the shelves on February the 8th, I believe, is the date for that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris. Jay, thank you for your questions and your interest. We won't give away too much more. There's other surprises coming, but maybe a few kind of months push back, Chris. Maybe a limited edition might sneak its way in there around some event, maybe around April time, possibly, or possibly not.
I love it. Again, stop by the booth at the PGA show.
Thank you very much, gents. That's very informative as always, Chris. So appreciate your time.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Jay.
You're welcome.